Hey, what's up, guys? Mikey here from the Strange Road.
Bub, what's happening?
We're here with Juan from Juan Podcast. Juan, what's happening, man?
What's up, dude? This is a little intro. We're gonna start it backwards today, right?
Yeah. Well, exactly. We had an awesome conversation leading up to this right now, and we're gonna pick up right where we left off. But dude, happy to be on your show.
Hell
this
yes.
is awesome.
Thank you.
Strange Road One SWAPCAST, baby.
Ready to rock.
Yeah.
I was wondering how we're gonna do that. So yeah, check them out. Check me out. tjljp.com. Everyone knows where to find me, and I'll plug my intro and everything at the beginning. So it's all good, bro. But the aspect, I talk about this a lot on my show, right? The occult, esoteric. I think those are topics that a lot of people want to understand, and there's many different interpretations. I'm not saying at any point in time that I have the answers. I don't believe I do. So because I'll have people within the organizations in which I talk about. So like these magical orders, Golden Dawn, Thelema, whatever, all these different orders that'll hit me up.
Mm-hmm.
And some people aren't happy. Some people are like, hey, you're closer than you might think otherwise. And it's like, well, there's no secret societies anymore. It's like anything that you've ever wanted to learn is literally at your fingertips.
Yeah.
On the internet. Yep. And it seems that we're dumber now than we ever have been since the beginning. Or it seems like society's more dumbed down now than they were. And we literally have supercomputers in our pockets now. That's part of the conspiracy, if you will, or not. I don't know. And I like to think about what I talk about, like conspiracult, to where the conspiracy meets the occult, where it meets there's one more thing it meets in there. Religion, right? I think it's all interconnected. I think it's all connected in some way or another, because if you think about it,
and
right, we're talking about these
pop culture and movies and music and it's Jay-Z and Beyonce. And I mean, I went down my rabbit holes with occult symbolism, and it's just everyday
realistically
life.
It's entwined in everything. Yeah, it has to be. That's why it all works together. And you're like, how does this connect to that? That doesn't make any sense. But there's always some weird connection like that. Michael
Hoffman, he's a really well-known author and I guess the conspiracy / occult realm. And he talks about how the regular person nowadays is more initiated than the actual initiates of secret societies because of the things that we've been exposed to, again, movies and otherwise. And I think that I've always thought about this, where during a lot of things that we know today, as far as Hollywood, they were born during the Great Depression. So during the 1930s, I thought about like, how was it that these movie theaters, right? Because we had that thing happen in 2020. I was like, how is it that movie theaters stayed alive? Well, it's been a sort of MK Ultra technology since the beginning, because in the 1930s, people, and this is going to tie into the bigger picture, people kept movie theaters alive, and we had King Kong, we had Dracula, we had what's another one? White Zombie. We had all the greatest hits of like the mythos of Hollywood, if you will, was born during the 1930s. And I was like, wait a minute. Where'd all the money come from for them to fund those movies? Like, how were they, if the economy was collapsed,
right?
Where'd they get the money to produce those movies? And the reason was people were flocking to the movie theaters. Why? Because it's a form of escapism. So they were going into these rooms and they were living through the movies. They were living through the characters. They were living through the stories. And I mean, I don't know about you guys, but when I love cryptid podcasts, so I'll sit and I'll listen to stories, because everyone loves a good story.
Oh yeah,
everyone loves to hear a crazy story. So I don't know about you guys, but I'll be sitting sometimes, even reading a book or listening to a book or whatever, and I think when somebody's telling a really good story that just hooks you and it drags you in, this is what these people's lives were garbage. They were poor. There were people unaliving themselves during this time because it got so bad. But then when they would enter these rooms, right, dark, lights, sound, they were living through these movies. So the people kept them alive. And you zoom back out and it's like, well, you start to make connections as to, let's say all of Hollywood is an initiation. Well, guess who uses caves for their initiations and their rites and rituals? Well, secret societies use caves for their rites and rituals. Everybody uses it. The Mithraic cults and all these different. The Freemasons use caves for their rites and rituals, and it's like there's something about that. And then you link that to Egypt, There's a reason why there was, sarcophagus and all these different things. Maybe not only was it for a burial type of thing, death rites, whatever, might have had also some occult connotations, right? With the Knights Templar, there's various conspiracies with them, and those they're tied to the church. But when I start to make all these connections, I go, man, there's a lot more here than meets the eye. And I honed in really on alchemy. And the reason I honed in on alchemy is because on the outside, I wanted to understand it. I'm like, what's going on here? What is the bigger picture? They're turning lead into gold. I mean, why are they using all this symbolism? And when you start to understand it, you go, wait a minute. Through these individuals' pursuit of wanting to obtain the Philosopher's Stone, we have the industry of ceramics. The guy who invented ceramic pottery it wasn't ceramics. I have to think of exactly what it was. It was some sort of pottery. The reason he created it was because he was trying to make the Philosopher's Stone. Right. We have guys like Paracelsus who helped the 16th century alchemist, helped create you have anesthesia, right? You have a lot of things attributed to Paracelsus that, again, was an alchemist, was just crazy. Think of like the archetypal mad scientist in a lab somewhere. Like that was Paracelsus, this little guy carried around a sword that people thought he had a homunculus in it, which we can get into. And he had a horse that the devil gave to him that never tired.
What's a homunculus?
We'll get there. So,
okay, cool. We'll leave that one there.
We have, all right, and I'll break it down. So we have alchemy, right?
And this is Hermes. This is the line of Hermes. All these guys back then were Hermes Trismegistus, who was Thoth from Egypt. They're the same exact guy,
Let's go back. Let's go back further. So you have Thoth,
the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, which you talked about the underworld, the caves. That's the halls of Amenti. When Thoth writes about in the Emerald Tablets of going into the dwelling, he talks about, and that's where the knowledge is. The halls of Amenti, whatever you want to call it, the Akashic records, but it's all underground. This
I don't know what any of this means.
Well, the hall of Mentees, you said?
Yeah, the hall of Amenti.
Mint, mind.
Well,
so
that
mente,
sounds Greek for mentate, and
Yeah, mente is mind in Spanish, so you have that connection there. But when I said let's go further, do you know who they've linked Thoth to be related to as far as biblical patriarchy? So the knowledge of alchemy comes from the Nephilim. The Nephilim passed it down to the daughters of men, and in exchange for we've read the book of Genesis, so they're doing favors for the women, vice versa, and we have this bloodline of Noah. That they were one of the greatest alchemists of all time. The alchemists, there's a lot of commentaries on the book of Genesis, and I've done one translation so far on Gerard Dorn, a commentary on the book of Genesis, where they believe that the book of Genesis it is illustrating the magnum opus in alchemy. So how to create this Philosopher's Stone, this Unus Mundi, Unus Mundus, which is essentially a little world in a vessel, if you will. And in alchemy, there's various things that the alchemist works for. The homunculus, in my opinion, is one of them, which you can get a copy of the homunculus owner's manual on tjoljp.com. Nice. I'll send you guys a couple of these.
Cool.
Oh yeah.
That's really cool.
It's 33 pages of how to take care of your homunculus. So the homunculus is one aspect of alchemy. You have the Philosopher's Stone, you have the divine androgen, and then you have the elixir of life or elixir of immortality. Now the Philosopher's Stone, there's a red stone, there's a silver stone. So the red stone creates gold, the silver stone creates silver. And the homunculus is what I've termed a blood and bones talisman. And we can get into that. That's a whole different subsection. The divine androgen, this is a weird one where the alchemist essentially goes through a sort of metamorphosis. So they're concocting all these potions and all these things, and they're drinking it to try and renew themselves. And there's stories about a lot of ancient Chinese emperors. This is why at the terracotta warriors, there's a giant pool of mercury.
Oh my.
Because these guys, they were experimenting with different forms of mercury to try and extend their life. So if you look at the origins of alchemy in the East, right? You have the idea. I'm sorry. So Chinese alchemy, you have the idea of they were more focused on extending their life. So these guys were literally dying of mercury poisoning because they were drinking these concoctions that their alchemists, their court of alchemists was just mixing for them because they wanted to live forever. I mean, who doesn't want to live forever? That's the whole thing of transhumanism. They want to extend life as long as possible.
Right.
So they're going to do whatever it was.
Well.
Right.
Everyone. I mean,
Larry
you have
Summers.
Jeff Bezos, you know, also getting into that whole thing of it literally says the title was
Epstein. All of his genetic experiments.
And, getting basically your own blood boy to get your blood transfusions weekly. Like,
well, that's what the Zorro Ranch in New Mexico.
No, I mean they made a joke about that on like Silicon Valley about the one dude, like as far as like tech giants and people doing, you know, it's another weird kind of like woo woo type movement of, hey, we're gonna do blood transfusions and we're gonna get, you know, skin creams made out of this kind of body part or whatever. Like, I don't even want to talk about like that stuff's so bizarre beyond me, where I'm like, we used to not want to test animals or like use it, you know, like do this or that. I'm like, no,
it's gonna get.
I'm with it.
Interesting, bro.
I'm with it. I don't want to.
Hang tight, bro, because it's gonna get. This is just a tip, all right. This is just a tip. I'm warming you guys up. This is the esoteric foreplay that we're into right now.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
And so we have the Philosopher's Stone, the Elixir of Life, which the Divine Androgen, which again the way it's described is that the alchemist becomes an androgen being, and they become interdimensional in some sort of way, and it's done through again taking of these elixirs. There's stories of their hair falling all out, their nails falling out, and then growing back, their teeth falling out. So almost like a vampire, almost like some weird werewolf type of lore. And then you have so we did the Philosopher's Stone, the Elixir of Life, the Divine Androgen. Now we have the Homunculus. And again, all these topics that I'm saying, we're going to dive the deepest into the Homunculus, but they're all their own deep dive. Like the father of binary code, Leibniz, was the guy that we have the ones and zeros in our computer. He was fascinated with alchemy, and he went around collecting stories of transmutation. And the transmutation is the projection of base metals. So projecting your raising its value. So going from base metals to gold, right? So the alchemists believe, which they weren't too far off, but the alchemists believe that if everything is composed of the same material, which it is atoms, therefore, you can the same atoms that are in lead are in gold. So if you're able to, again, alchemy, the manipulation of matter. Okay. Now, the alchemist is working on 4 different dimensions simultaneously. So whenever you do conduct this magnum opus and you do get the lead into gold, the projection, right? And there's various stories of people who were present. Well, there's also stories about guys who conducted and did the magnum opus and did their concoctions and everything and their mixtures and all that stuff. And the light from that reaction of turning the lead into gold was so big that it got embedded in their DNA and changed their DNA and transformed them into what is called the Homo Luminous, a light being. So this is where it gets woo-woo, because in alchemy, you have the immortal alchemists, which were the guys who every couple thousand years you'd get a new one, who were able to conduct the magnum opus and achieve the highest level, the great work. And they phased out of reality. They phased out of existence. Now, why is that? Well, because in alchemy, once you learn to manipulate matter, you're able to step outside of space and time and manipulate space and time from the outside.
I just kind of blew my mind.
Well,
like
this is like the White Brotherhood material that I talk about sometimes.
Absolutely. The Rosicrucians.
What it made me think of those, like, you know, just surmise really quickly, like if you do get to that, you know, if you're here over and over and over and you keep reliving this life and you figure it out, and then you get to that point and you are just like maybe Nicholas Flamel, one day you just like whoop, you just blip like right out of existence because you're like, I can now manipulate my own atoms to get out of this.
Saint Germain.
Have you seen the new Flash? Where he phases in through the walls like that.
Yeah,
I did just watch. That's so funny, and I would not have watched that.
But, you know,
than I was
Sir Francis Bacon. He was an alchemist. He's supposedly Saint Germain. There's these beings. That's this White Brotherhood material where, whether it's Jesus or Buddha or, you know,
this is very interesting.
They ascend. It's this whole. you can call them gods or ascended masters is the name that the White Brotherhood gives. And there's literally like 100 of these beings. And they're Saint Germain, Sir Francis Bacon, essentially the same guy that, like he said, learned this material, perfected it, and ascended into these higher dimensions, which
fascinating.
There's all these representations of Sir Francis Bacon over this being has come back over and over and over again. But it's Saint Germain. It's Jesus was, going back to, even Krishna and Jesus, they were both born of the Virgin Mary. So you have these beings, like Juan's saying, that come back throughout time, but they're really the same being.
I see what you're saying there. I mean, I get it. I'm thinking of like Buddha, if you want to go with the Dalai Lama or, supposedly. But I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying.
I'll throw a wrench into the mix. So if you start to get into like Philip, what they call it, Dickian Gnosticism or something like that. Yeah. So Philip K. Dick.
Oh yeah.
He talks about how reality is a computer and all these characters that you're talking about, this White Brotherhood, it's actually the system almost kind of sort of injecting itself with antibodies to try and purge reality.
Right.
But yet we know what happens to all these figures. They're crucified, they're whatever, XYZ. But it's actually, again, this is very Gnosticism was one of those things that I got into heavily when I first started, because it was right along the line of like, hey, all the stories that you've learned, there's the complete opposite of those stories in this. And look at the Nag Hammadi, look at the Dead Sea Scrolls, and then you just start reading that, and it shifts your paradigm. It like completely obliterates whatever indoctrination that you had, and you're like, damn, now how can I believe the stuff that I was taught already if I already see the opposite is here? What makes it different? That yours is the official narrative, this is the underground. And I've learned from history that usually the people who are talking truths, they usually end up somewhere not alive. So, and our society now kind of sort of rewards people for, I got banned off of YouTube because I was talking about this thing. Now I'm telling the truth. It's like, are you? Or are they making you believe that you're telling that? So again, it's a very slippery slope. But Philip K. Dick would say that the system is injecting itself, trying to essentially heal itself with these figures. And he believed, and I'm in accordance to what he's talking about, that the alchemists, the reason that they were wiped out was because they were at the border of what he called this next evolutionary step. And it makes a lot of sense, because whenever I'm doing research and I follow the historical aspect of it. So I like to speculate, and I like to speculate a lot, but I like to speculate even more when I have some sort of historical thing to back it up with, right? And I know history's fake and it's been fabricated, whatever, but we still need a system to measure out time frames, right? So whenever I read works of like Philip K. Dick that fill in these gaps of like what was Gnosis? Well, to the Gnostics, Gnosis was this sacred knowledge. And it's like, well, there's no writings as to what it was. Well, what if Gnosis was something like, because they were alchemists too, what if Gnosis was like the sort of same thing where there's a string of words and letters and ideas that will destroy you, like Mikey and Bub as a person. That if you were to read something, there's a string of words that will just undo your entire reality itself.
That's a curse.
And just like break you completely. It's just a string of words.
Yeah, that's a curse, essentially.
So what if Gnosis is just that once you learn that truth, you just dissolve out of reality. Once you learn the name of JFK's real assassin group, you fizzle out of existence.
That's the one thing that's just holding you back, baby.
We don't see you ever again. That's it. You're done. Like damn, that dude achieved the next level. Like the Faustian pact. The Faustian complex is one of those things in the human nature where it's like you want more and more knowledge. Like my son the other day asked me, "Daddy, do you know everything?" I was like, "No, I don't know everything." Because to them, you fix things, you put batteries in their their toys, and like, "Oh, he knows. My daddy knows everything." It's like, "Daddy, do you know everything?" I was like, "No." He's like, "Well, why don't you know everything?" I go, "Because you can't possibly know everything." And he's like, "Well, why not?" And I'm trying to grasp how a 5-year-old's mind works, and I was like, "Damn, why not?" Could you imagine knowing it? Could you imagine what it would be like if you knew everything. And to me, I was just thinking about all the different cosmologies, all the 45 different denominations of Christianity alone. Like, what happens when you connect the dots between all of those? And you just start to think like, damn, what would you want to know everything? Is that what it would be like to be a god, right? To be God, maybe a lowercase g. I don't think anyone can. I think that a lot of groups in history have tried to become the Godhead, but I don't think they've ever achieved God. I don't think anyone can be God. I think that I think God is.
You have to drop your ego to get to those places of understanding. That's a big part of is destroying your ego to be able to get up, and that's part of the whole alchemical process is transmuting yourself and your consciousness. So many people have always thought just focusing on the gold aspect of turning lead into gold. You're transmuting everything, your physical being, your spiritual being. Like you were talking about the Gnostics, the early Christians, the Essenes are so fascinating. When you learn about the Essenes, they were the early Christians. That's basically who Jesus and Mary Magdalene and also John the Baptist. Essentially they were in these early groups that were kind of these subsects of Judaism, but really they were connected to the Egyptian mystery schools. They were occultists. When you read about the Dead Sea Scrolls, a lot of these things that these early religions were all over the place, and there Mithra and all these different groups. The Zoroastrians, they were constantly sharing knowledge and traveling to Egypt and those things. But a lot of our kind of modern Christianity comes from those groups that weren't Christians at all. They were pretty much mystery school followers.
That's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people, but it's like, hey, I mean, again, if you follow the chronological history, these guys that I'm talking about were at the forefront of Christianity. We're the founders, like the Platonists, Neoplatonists, all these guys were at the forefront of Christianity. And that's why you have a lot of parallels. I'm not, again, I consider myself a Christian, not a practicing Christian by any means, but I do believe in Jesus Christ. And I do believe that, he died for our sins and all that. But I've learned to put aside my personal beliefs and focus solely on the research aspect of things. So if I talk about something, doesn't necessarily mean I believe it 100%. It just, I find history interesting. And this is one of the ones where it's like, there's so much to it that you start to really peel apart and go, wow, this is really, really fascinating. So we have, again, the Gnostics are at the forefront of this evolution. We have the concept of a homunculus. And now the homunculus was a really weird one for me at first, because when I stumbled across it, so the word grammar comes from grimoire, and a grimoire is a 16th century book on spells. The reason that's the etymology of the word grammar. So essentially a grimoire was a book of words, recipes for spells, so magical spells, and that's etymology. And so you had these weird grimoires that when I stumbled across it, I'm like, all right, this is really bizarre. But again, I think we all have a morbid, aside from what I had mentioned at the beginning, where we all want to know the truth if something's real, we also have a sort of morbid curiosity when it comes to certain things. I don't know about you guys, sometimes that's why true crime podcasts are so popular. Yeah. People want to hear the details. So when I'm learning about this, I'm like, wait a minute. So essentially a homunculus, which is another branch of alchemy. And mind you, in alchemy, you had different branches as well. So you had the Paracelsian line, you had the Valentinian line, you had the whatever other line. They had different schools of thought. There's the dry path, wet path. Like there's so many different, just you can weave in and out, like when it comes to alchemy. And the homunculus, essentially, we've all seen, and this is the scary part about the homunculus, that recently there's been a few articles that have come out where they're like, Chinese lab creates entity in lab without a mother and a father. Like that's science today, right? Or as I like to say, trust the science or trust the seance, right? It's kind of sort of the same thing, right? Seances. So we have this aspect of, wait a minute, we've all heard the story of Frankenstein, right? I mean, if you haven't, right? They were doing essentially what? They were grafting together this being, they shocked it, came to life. Well, there's a precursor to that. is the golem. You had the golem, which is in Jewish mysticism, a man created from the ground, animated through word magic, essentially. So they create this, they mold this being, and it's an android. It's more of like an AI technological thing. We've all seen the Terminator, right? So a golem is
the Greys.
The gray. The Greys?
Yeah, the Greys are kind of like these androidy, kind of human. They're really more drones than they are. They feel like they don't really have. They're kind of just blank. They're more robotic than anything.
Well, Greer says that the Greys that we know that abduct and do all these experimentations on people are actually biologically created beings by the U.S. government. So just, again, an interesting connection there with alchemy, with essentially the artificial creation of life.
Yeah. Because
at the core of everything, right, what God giveth, God taketh. Well, God creates life. God creates new beings. So alchemists were like, we want to be, I think at the core of reality itself, society, I think people want more money. So the alchemists had that done. Like, all right, let's create gold. All right. If we can create an endless amount of gold, boom. So that's why Rudolph II had a whole court of alchemists working for him. Alchemist Alley in Prague. You can go there, and that was the houses of where all the alchemists live. Mind you, this is royalty. Okay, this is royalty. This is the Holy Roman Emperor. Okay, Rudolph II. This is royalty. This is the top of the top. They believe in that. Like, damn.
Oh yeah.
Now I want to live forever. I want gold.
Yeah.
You had Elizabeth II.
John Dee lived with Queen Elizabeth for his whole entire life until he was really run out. That's the guy that would speak through angels through his crystal ball.
Oh my.
Yeah, we'll get to that. We can talk about that.
He's like Sir Isaac. He's like the predecessor of Sir Isaac Newton, who was an alchemist. Like John Dee.
Isaac Newton was.
He was a follower of John Dee, who was like pretty much a magician.
Very cool.
100%. And by the way, yeah. So it's raining now. So just in case, it's blowing hard.
Got you.
So just in case, John Dee is the typical Faustian pact. That's who it's modeled after. So they believe that he was able to do all these things, and so they believe that he had made pacts with the devil. So we can get to that. That's enoch, and that's another one of my fortes that I love talking about, because again, it's interdimensional. So you have this artificial creation of life. You have royalty. You had money. That they were interested in this sort of thing, and that's just that. Those are just one of the people that were interested in this sort of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the alchemist, unlimited money, sure, gold. All right, what's next? Let's see, live forever, immortality. Yeah, we got that too. It's like, what's left? Well, what if we could create artificial life? All right, we got that too. So that's where the homunculus comes in, where essentially what it is, it's and the alchemical homunculus is an artificially created being through the use of alchemy. Now, that's fine, right? Because that's think of it like a little helper, a mini me in Austin Powers, where it looks like him, right? The problem with that is that only a few alchemists created it. There's a few stories about it. There's instructions on how to do it, depending on which philosophy you follow. But then it gets really weird, because they go, okay, so we created this little alchemical being. If it's created through the great work, through the royal art, then wouldn't it itself be magic? So what happens if I don't know, dissect it or vivisect it and use its body parts for different magical purposes? And you got entire books on just that, using different body parts of the homunculus for different magical purposes. And again, that's where it can get really dark really quick.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And also very interesting, because it's like, wait a minute.
Right.
Wait a minute, because you start to tie in other things that go, right? We talked about Epstein earlier. Well, just use your imagination as to what could possibly be going on.
Why did he have a strange temple that was white and blue on his property on the island?
There's a lot of strange.
That was just basically made of cardboard almost. It was like particle board. Like what? So why do you have some strange temple in your backyard?
Yeah, and I've connected that to the homunculus. That's along the 33rd parallel, which is in New Mexico, the land of enchantment, which is near the Trinity site, where some people believe that the U.S. government tried to create a homunculus using radioactivity with their big jumbo cylinder thing that they never told anybody what it was for, but they're like, yeah, kind of, think of like a Bob in, Twin Peaks or something like that. Right? Like this thing that
well, that's what
were they trying to do?
Mr. E and J talked to me about when I went to Mothman Festival, that all this deep underground base outside of Point Pleasant is where now all those ponds are. It's all collapsed because that was the subterranean layers where they were doing all these ridiculous experiments.
Oh my.
And so either they created the Mothman or were ripping open portals. And apparently there's a few guys in Point Pleasant that know where these portals are.
I've heard you talk about that
Mothman being a homunculus is a theory.
Yeah.
Because, and he got out of the cage, and they're not chopping him up anymore and using him for alchemical purposes?
He's some kind of interdimensional higher being that isn't exactly physical, 3D.
Think about it like this, Bub.
Blowing my mind.
So you have homunculus means little man in land, little miniature man, like little man.
Adamu from
that's what it means, right?
Yeah.
Homunculus means miniature man.
Mini-me.
Homunculus. Yeah.
I'm gonna start calling my dog that.
Homunc and then culus, which is small. Again, I don't know how to
homunculus.
Homunculus. Yeah. So they had these little people, these little men. The new Willy Wonka movie has, I guess, in the trailer has the man in the jar. Oompa Loompas. But they started mixing. All right, so when they created the little man, they're like, all right, well, what happens if I use the womb of the vessel of a bird or a cow or a bull, whatever, insert whatever, and you start to get chimeras. Mm-hmm. Okay, and that's where you get, in my opinion, the Minotaur, right? And all these things, the harpies, right? All these different chimeric creatures throughout all of history, especially in ancient Egypt, where the land of alchemy is where alchemy comes from. The Egyptians were, again, the Gnostics were the first alchemists. And that's where you get Thoth and Hermes and all these guys that pass down that knowledge. So, and in their depictions, I just went to a King Tut exhibit not too long ago in Atlanta. They have, the hieroglyphs and everything. And they have little, what they call shaptis, where it's these little statues that would help the emperor in the afterlife. They would animate in the afterlife and help the emperor do all the chores. What does that sound like? It sounds like a little magical helper. Again, this idea of a homunculus sort of being, because mind you, the word homunculus didn't come into existence until the 16th century. So let's just keep that in mind. But we can call these proto-homunculi, which again, there's different names for them. They were called the child, the form, the substance, it had different names right before it was called the homunculus. So just to keep that in mind. And again, I know this is a whole lot of stuff, but
I love it.
History starts to make sense when you're like, all right, if they were running experiments, well, you had as late as the 20th century, Crowley, who wrote a book called The Moonchild. Now, this is where I believe Epstein and all these guys come in, and the use of Enochian magic, because through this book that was published in 1929, Moonchild, I believe it was 1929, by Crowley. He wrote it earlier than that. He has there, it's a story. It's a story about two groups, two different lodges, the black magicians and white magicians, and their fight over an unborn child, a moon child that they were trying to create. And essentially what a moon child is where they use the fetus as a sort of talisman to be able to house an elemental or entity, an angel, demon, get your pick. And I'm getting some weird feedback on my end. Do you guys hear that?
I don't think so.
Uh-oh. When I start talking about the moon children, my thing starts bugging out.
Yes. You're over the target.
All right. So
I'm going to take a small pause and go to the bathroom. Sorry. I'll be right back.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead. Let me see. It just went away, I think. No, it's still going.
Yeah, I don't hear anything. I mean, unless it's just when you're talking that you're hearing it on your end, on your own voice.
So
are you hearing
a little bit when you? Go ahead, talk again. It's gone now.
Right on. I don't know. Maybe you said the storm was coming through a little bit more earlier. Maybe something happened with that. I don't know. I don't really hear anything. Everything sounds stellar to me, but it doesn't mean it couldn't be on your end as well.
Right from the timestamp.
Right on. I don't think Mikey had any issue on his audio.
Yeah, as soon as I start talking about that, start getting all.
He hopped up out of here. He's like, I'm going to the bathroom.
I'm gonna put my phone on airplane mode just in case, because but yeah, we're getting a bad cold front coming through, and it's coming down hard. It's gonna be really bad because the problem is we get tornadoes is the issue. So we got bad lightning because of the lakes in the area. There's, really big natural freshwater lakes. They attract a lot of lightning.
Did not know that.
Florida's actually the lightning capital of the world. So
also did not know that. I love lightning.
Yeah, dude. When the lightning hits the ground, it crystallizes. It's like it has some. And my friend, he has this whole section at his shop. He has a occult book club shop, and he has this. The big the big snails. I forgot the name of it, but it's the big snail. You know what I'm talking about? The water snail.
Oh, Nautilus.
A Nautilus, but that was hit by a lightning or something crazy, bro. And it's got this crazy design on it from the chemical reaction of the lightning. I'll have to send you a picture, but it's crazy. Yeah, it's really crazy.
I'm down with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Vitrification.
Something like that. Yeah. Yeah. It goes through some process.
Yep.
All right.
Turn to glass.
All right, we're good. The sound is gone.
Cool.
So I don't know what the hell happened there, but all right. So we have Crowley, Moonchild, which inspired Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard.
Oh boy!
So you got Jack Parsons, the father of modern day rocketry, and you have L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology. And they were in the desert over in California doing sex magic rituals, trying to summon an elemental, the Scarlet Woman, which some people say that he did actually achieve. And this was during the 40s, and it was his second wife, Marjorie Cameron, which was the Scarlet Woman, redhead. She was a redhead, and she went on to get in contact with, I think it's Kenneth Anger.
Yeah.
Anyways, some people in Hollywood, Kenneth Anger, that whole thing, and she ended up starting her own. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that movie in particular, with was his name Polanski? What's his
Roman?
Name?
Yeah, Polanski.
He wrote that movie and did that movie, and it turned out that everything that was in that movie, he was accused of after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
So when I said Moonchild earlier, mind you, these occultists use fiction and reality, and it has some sort of amplification effect where it amplifies either the spell that they're trying to do or something. It does something, and it's got to do with the idea of just this vowel magic or or even grammatical entities. How I said the word grimoire comes, transforms into grammar eventually. So there's something magical about language itself, and there's something even more magical about writing. About it solidifies it in reality in some sort of weird way. I don't understand this any more than I did when I first started, but this is just patterns, right? So from this 1929 book, we have a rocket scientist, which a lot of people go, it's not rocket science, right? It can't be that hard. Well, a rocket scientist was an avid follower of Crowley, and he took some of these spells that he had written in the Moonchild book and put them into test, put them into application in real world. And it just comes to show you, these guys, we're talking about royalty, people in royalty who were believing in these occult, esoteric, alchemical beliefs.
Oh, yeah.
You have what they said was a super smart guy, right? Jack Parsons, maybe he was in touch with entities on the other side. I don't know. But he was believing this knowledge.
How about this one? The Python Man. Recently, the interview, I believe it was on Joe Rogan.
Oh, yeah.
Rogan. And he was hunting for pythons in this old abandoned building. and there was all this occultic symbolism and what they thought was like basically a nightgown of a little girl with like some kind of magical ritual altar, and it freaked him the hell out.
Sure.
And he got out of there. And as he was driving out, he was being followed, and they find out that it's one of Jack Parsons, JPL's old buildings from back in the day with their work with NASA. And that building was owned by Jack Parsons, who was a known occultist. And
I don't know if it was owned, because I know exactly where it's at. Anyone can go there. Yeah. So that's in Homestead. It's the old Aero. Okay. I don't know the name of it. I don't know if it was owned by Parsons. There is still a rocket in the silo there, and I haven't been there. I was invited one time to do some, I guess, rituals there. They want, anyways. They wanted to invite me there to open up portals, and I had said no. So I know where that's at. I don't know if it was owned by Parsons, but what happened was they were testing. This is before NASA switched over their fuels, when they were using actual solid fuels. And the reason I know is because I've fished the canal, the Aerojet Canal there in the Everglades, which was specifically dug out there for the transporting by barge of these rockets. So they used this one canal off of US 1 for locals, because I lived there for a time, so locals will know what I'm talking about. And this is right before getting to the first key. So you have Florida, it's all the way at the end, Homestead, all the way at the end, in the middle of the Everglades, all the way at the end, right before getting to the bridge to go to the Florida Keys.
Oh, the 7 Mile Bridge or whatever it is.
There you go.
Bro, yeah, I've driven to Key West from there, yeah.
So it's one of those exits that you go off to the side before going that long road to the Keys. And again, I don't know if it was owned, but I do know which episode you're talking about. I recently brought that up. I was just on the confessionals where we talked about the Miami aliens, and we brought that up because, again, the idea of, to me, this is my personal belief, space is not what they've told us. And I always say space is fake and gay, but space is, if you look at everything, if you look at the naming, Parsons would do a him to pan every rocket launch. And if you look at,
he would do a what every rocket launch?
A hymn to Pan. So it's one of their gods. Pan.
Oh, a hymn to Pan. I'm sorry. A hymn to Pan. I got you now.
Yeah. Hymn to Pan. So you have Pan, Panic. They relate that to Baphomet, meat, all these different deities, idols, whatever you want to call it.
Copy.
And so the connection of NASA with the occult, it's obviously there. Like that's the dark history of NASA. Like
thinking that earlier.
The
Yeah.
Nazis,
I'm already there with
Parsons,
the Nazis, Parsons.
Well, and this whole
von Braun,
the whole illusion control too. If we're talking about keeping people in this kind of Plato's cave of knowledge control, like if you want to control what's the thoughts about what's going on up above us in space, you generate it for us, right? You tell us what's out there. You say, hey, we've sent rockets up and it's like this, or right? Like you get out there.
The action of sending a rocket into space to me is a ritual. So if you look at how it is, like how it's a phallus.
You're not wrong.
Right? You're shooting a giant phallus into the sky. You know, think about what this is. I'm trying not to bring in other cosmologies, but if you look at the firmament, you know what the earth symbolizes and everything. So it's a fire ritual, essentially, is what it is. And everyone's attention is focused in on it. Now, I think, in my opinion, a lot of these astronauts were kind of shady. Maybe there's people on those rockets, maybe not. And maybe those people that we see on these feeds, maybe they're off grid somewhere where they got access to some sort of internet and they're able to live shot. You know, the bubbles in space never made sense to me. I'm not a flat earther. I am more of a hollow earther, if anything. I think that the answer is at the bottom of our oceans. So, because you got that whole thing. Now,
well, that does go to the moon landing and Jack Parsons' connection with Jared Leto's current house that he lives in.
Oh, God.
Which was in Laurel Canyon, which was a secret, basically run by the intelligence community, and was a massive soundstage and set, which supposedly was where they filmed the fake moon, and having Kubrick on board. Jack Parsons was a part of that. Your boy from Scientology back then, before Scientology. All these guys they were all Crowleyists.
Yeah.
They were all followers of Crowley.
They were all government assets.
And they were all inside intelligence assets.
He
was a Navy man.
I still have a big problem with the whole moon landing stuff. We just had a probe, or we had something that just went askew here recently in the last week or two. That was supposed to be this probe we were sending up. We were supposed to send manned missions coming up in 25, I think, or end of 24, and they've pushed that off to 26. It's like, okay, I'll believe it again when we get there. Maybe we could just take all the steps we did before to get there so many times and just do it again and have,
biggest
Neil Armstrong hit another golf ball off the moon. I mean,
the biggest secret society, the U.S. government. I mean, if you ever wonder why the Secret Service is called the Secret Service, now that makes a lot of sense to me. The Secret Service, the SS, huh?
Servicing the secrets. Yeah. That's that's out in the open too.
Homeland Security, when it was found, that was literally the Nazis had a group in German that's literally translated into Homeland Security.
Oh, really?
Yes, Hitler had a Homeland Security.
Well,
it's almost like the CIA became a corrupted form of
it was the OSS,
the underground. Yeah. But once the Nazis infiltrated through Operation Paperclip, there's
infiltrated. We just brought them over.
We brought them over.
Infiltrated. They probably just like, hey, come over here. It's cool now.
Yeah, all the way.
Come build rockets with his burner.
Yeah, they're running shit through Argentina. All those guys are living in Argentina. And
there's whole communities in South America.
Pretty well documented that Himmler and a lot of the high-ranking, including Hitler, probably made it to Argentina. And who knows what kind of effect they could have on our culture throughout these years. Through the CIA and secret societies and Hollywood and.
Yeah, but it's just not the story everybody wants to hear. It's not the reality everybody wants to happen. It's not the movie ending that everybody went into those buildings for when they were,
10 years ago,
looking for that escapism, right, Juan? Yeah. So, maybe that's the whole point of it is, maybe that's why reality is not fun to deal with, is because it's not the way that we would choose for things to go a lot of times, but that's kind of what is going on. So, but that is also one of the things that keeps me grounded in it, is trying to, deal with it so I can, actually figure out what's going on. I can't go back to being ignorant. I couldn't try if I wanted to.
Yeah, that's something that I don't know if you can tell. I can't really have normal conversations with people anymore.
I fully understand.
I can't watch a movie anymore without going into this. I started watching Prometheus the other night.
Oh boy,
Aliens, Prometheus.
With at least 3 or 4 times in the last couple months, I've watched that film.
I love that movie so much. A lot of people didn't like it, but I like it. And I started watching it, and the planet that they go to, where the engineers are at, it's 223. We reverse that's 322, which is the whole skull and bones.
Yes.
And I was like, when I saw, I was like, all right, whatever. So, but you start to catch things. The more you learn, the more things start to pop out,
right.
and now it just kind of sort of happens automatically, especially now with doing it. Like decoding for a community, it kind of just automatically sort of pops out to me to where okay, and then I can talk about this on the show or whatever it is. And it's a blessing and a curse, I guess. But yeah, it really sucks the fun out of everything, because you start to deconstruct everything. I mean, but they're putting so much garbage in even kids shows, baby shows, the whole Coco Melon.
I was just going to say Coco. I would not let my kids watch Coco Melon.
Never.
It's woke now.
If you put Coco Melon on, they will literally. It's the only thing they'll actually watch.
It's crazy.
When babies are little, they don't even pay attention to the TV.
So,
but when you put Coco Melon on, they are on it, and they will watch it for hours upon hours. If that's people will just put their kids in front of Coco Melon for hours, and I'm like, this is weird. It felt weird right away. I'm like, nope.
It's weird, bro.
Is it a program
it's strange?
I don't want to make any comments.
It's hypnotizing them in some way.
I'll have to check it out. If you would catch me stuck in my office next week when they're watching Coco Melon, whatever the hell that is, probably having a juice pack. And
it's nothing weird. It's nothing weird. It's just the timing that they use, the colors that they
Yes.
use, the cadences that they use in the show is MK Ultra for little babies, bro. It's like,
well, that's
MK
what I'm
Ultra for
saying.
toddlers.
That's what I'm saying. It's like some kind of like your eyes never close, you know, like
they're
just feeding you somehow. I know the vibe. I get it. I don't know that we ever had shows like that when we were kids. I mean, DuckTales was never that nefarious, you know. They were just teaching us history lessons about Aztec gold and, you know, making a time machine with a multicolored popsicle.
There was a
Bubba
lot of
Duck
symbolism in DuckTales.
There was a lot of symbolism.
A lot of occultism,
yeah,
and stuff like that.
In DuckTales for sure.
I was born in '94. I don't know what year you guys were born in, but we had Dragon Ball Z, we had Yu-Gi-Oh, we had.
I never watched any of that.
See, you grew up
I never
with
watched any of
Power
that.
Rangers. We were
I grew
more
up in that era.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, we got about a decade on.
Transformers.
Homunculus. Teenage Mutant Homunculus.
He just goes homunculus,
rat, bro.
Dude.
A rat in the sewers that teaches you kung fu. Come on, bro.
Yeah,
Yeah.
was great.
And then named after different historical people. Michelangelo, was it Da Vinci? Whatever.
Leonardo, Donatello, Raphael. Yeah, they were all
Look at the
famous.
history of all those guys.
Yeah, they were. Well,
It had us hook, line, and sinker. I'll tell you.
I'll tell you what, you might be making a lot of sense right now.
No, dude, I know I'm making it because when you go back and I've tried to put some of the shows that I watch for my son.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, in Yu-Gi-Oh, the Shadow Realm. Well, to some occultists, the Shadow Realm is a real place. Like, it's like, wait a minute, like what? Courage the Cowardly Dog. Weird things happen in the middle of nowhere. Well, the desert is right. You have the Skinwalker Ranch in Utah and the deserts, and then it's like, well, the devil lives in the desert. It's like, and then you look at the first episode, it's like the room is 666 and a half, and I'm like,
stop.
we've been fed this for a very long time, and Dragon Ball Z,
SpongeBob.
got a freaking talismans. If you collect them all together, you get granted a wish by a freaking dragon, and then they're like demigods. Like, what's going on? Like, all that stuff was all back in here, and I think that's all actually why I'm interested in a lot of things that I'm interested, because we grew up watching this sort of stuff.
Well,
so
I mean, I grew up with Indiana Jones.
No,
I grew up
you're
with
right.
The Goonies. Indiana Jones was a lot of occultic, like
Indiana Jones had a ton. I'm saying like cartoons. Like I wasn't sitting there watching. We just didn't have that. We had Bugs Bunny. Maybe there was some stuff in that. I don't like not as. It doesn't seem as overt as it's stuff like today, where it's like. Some of the things that I've seen where I'm like, what is the pyramid symbology going on? And they're talking about, you know, like there was one clip of this cartoon from like where they were doing it from like a Hollywood stance at time where I was like, this is so strange. Like, I can't believe this is a children's cartoon. Like, what does any of this have to do with kids? Like, where they're even going to pick up on this? Like, I could follow the plot of Fat Cat's schemes in Tailspin. I knew what he was, or Rescue Rangers. I knew what Fat Cat was trying to do. You know, he's trying to corner the market and fruit or whatever he was trying to do. Like, I got it, but it wasn't like, you know, Fat Cat was out there trying to, you know, cover the human trafficking trade. Like, you know, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's the kind of things getting slipped in where I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. I can take other innuendos, but like, I don't. How do you overtly put in some of the weirder things where I'm like, that doesn't make any sense?
Go watch Five American Tail. Remember that?
What does that mean?
Fievel? American
the mouse?
Tail.
Fievel goes
the
west?
mouse.
Yeah.
Go watch that again. The first one. Dude,
you're asking a lot. I mean,
we were kids, very little kids, watching American Tail. That's an adult movie. Go watch that.
I'll have to rewatch it.
It is dark, dude. I
won't watch Pinocchio. I've only ever seen that once in my life.
Pinocchio.
Never go back. Too much.
Pinocchio, Homunculus, another one.
There you go. There you go. Okay. Now that we're getting more examples out here, I'm with you.
All right. Bro, I mean, a lot of Disney is based on old Germanic folklore, which has more darker roots. So it's all, but just has the Disney twist on it. I mean, the whole idea of Disney, the reason it's right in Florida, it's the most magical place on earth. There's a reason why they're there. You have Disneyland along the 33rd parallel in California. There's a reason why it's there. I don't know if you guys ever read Walter Bosley's work with the Latitude 33. But essentially, they're tapping into these ley lines, right? These dragon lines, these old telluric currents.
That's the club, the 33 Club. In Disney. Walt Disney has a private club called the 33 Club.
Did not know that.
And it's on the 33rd parallel.
It's
literally called the Magic Kingdom.
How do you get into that?
Walter Disney, like the original Walt Disney, wasn't a Freemason. The one that was a Freemason was his brother.
Roy.
I believe his name is Roy.
Yeah.
Roy Disney. He's the one. So yeah, you do have a 33 club. He was part of the DeMolay, which is a sort of like Boy Scouts funded by Masons, which whatever. In Florida, it's built again along the same parallel that NASA and SpaceX is on, which is the 28th parallel. And the 28th degree in Templarism is the degree of the sun. So I think it goes back to like, right, Florida is the sunshine state. I think it goes back to sun worship and and maybe not even the sun. It might be right the brightest star, which we know that's Lucifer, right? The light bringer, which some people talk about it being Saturn, other people talk about it being Venus. There's a whole bunch of different cosmologies.
Saturn's cube, getting into the Saturn's cube, and Saturn having basically a hexagon storm that's in the shape of a hexagon on the North Pole. What is that about? I mean, that's just bizarre, like a perfect geometric shape.
So the conspiracy behind that was my first ever interview.
Really? The
conspiracy behind that, the Saturn time cube simulation, is that if you've ever heard the noises coming from the planets, like, so if you YouTube right now, sound that Mercury makes, or sound that Venus makes, or sound that Saturn makes. Saturn sounds like screaming, like people screaming. Damn. And the conspiracy is that Saturn, being Kronos, being father time, being, all these different cosmologies, that he's the demiurge, and that there is a cymatic device on Saturn that's creating through sound frequencies, creating and being amplified through the rings of Saturn, being pointed directly at Earth to keep us in, again, this sort of simulation. To a false reality in a sort of way. And I mean, we've seen movies about that left and right. You have Plato's cave. That's essentially what it is. Like, people are believing the shadows on the wall versus actual reality. And so the idea that that's why there's that shape, because of the cymatics. And now cymatics is the use of sound to create shapes. And if you connect the lines on the hexagon, it creates a cube. The Saturn is the seventh planet from the sun. Seventh day of the week is Saturn day. Sixth planet from the sun, sixth day of the week. And you have the six-sided shape on its north pole. So that's where you get the 666 symbolism. And then if you look at the history in any mythology of this Chrono/Saturn god, it's never good. He's eating his kids. He is, control over time. So very alchemical. Right. So it's like, if he controls time, then what else is going on? So that's where that comes from. And you see, and that's what did it for me. That's Nick Hinton, the Saturn Time Cube simulation, where once you see that, you go, okay, well, all these movies, Hellraiser, Transformers, At the Site of 9/11, you have Stanley Kubrick, it's Saturn. It's black cubes. It's like, wait a minute, the Allspark is a cube, a black cube, and the Hellraiser, they go in through a different reality in the cube. The black cube memorial at the 9/11 site. Then the other day there was some dude who fell into it, like bleeding. Like, what was going on there?
I didn't see that one. That sounds.
It was a 33-year-old man, or he fell 33 feet, something like that.
Always,
something like that.
Always. It never fails.
You start to make those connections, but again,
numerology,
is it all
gematria?
Is it being schizo and just like seeing patterns where they're not, right? Because it's easy to make things up. And that's where you get the whole tinfoil hat thing, where it's like, oh, put your tinfoil hat on.
Oh, but I think if you're like overly like charged sometimes, like you can see a conspiracy everywhere if you want. But like, I think when you just, again, take in so much of that information over time, it's like, it is what you're saying. It's like, some people can look at those 3D puzzles and get the picture really quick to just pop out. Like, you just know how to let your eyes unfocus. This to me is a way of getting so much information that you get overwhelmed to where you let your brain just go out of focus. And then it just starts letting things rise up out of it, where you go, I can't really tell you why, but this thing right here doesn't seem right. This seems like it's weird or off or whatever you want to say about it. And like, there are a lot of times you just don't really have the capability to put it into words or context, but you're like, my gut feeling from all of this information I've taken, and over time to be kind of trained as this cadaver dog of conspiratorial thought or nature, whatever it is, like, it just kind of presents itself to you and you're like, that's why that's weird to me. You don't even know it sometimes.
I had to hit pause because, like Bub just said, you get ungrounded with this stuff. And conspiracies and all those things led me looking into the occult and magic and Crowley and Madame Blavatsky. That's what led me to a lot of the conspiracies and the occultic stuff within, the secret societies, and kind of went backwards and came into the modern era of, all of these things go back to Crowley, go back to Blavatsky, but Blavatsky was going back to these kind of
predates
ancient Hindu,
else,
Crowley was doing rituals inside the Great Temple. That's when that weird little being that he writes about in the Book of the Law, and gosh, I can't remember.
Ayahuasca.
Yes, and it's this creepy little big-headed gremlin-looking dude.
That's Lamb. So
sorry,
that's two
Lamb.
different instances.
Yes.
Okay, let's go through these. What happened here?
So Lamb is from the Amalantra workings that happened in New York, and the Cairo workings, which happened in the Great Chamber, in the King's Chamber. That's where he got in touch with ayahuasca. Now, Lamb, a lot of people say that Crowley was, and let me make sure I'm saying it's Amalantra or Alamantra. Alamantra working. So it's the Amalantra working. Okay, so I got it right. So in the Amalantra workings, he was doing, it was during 420, right? It was around 420, or I think it was 418, something like that. They were doing these rituals, and it was in New York. They allegedly opened up a portal, and this being revealed itself to him. That a lot of people argue of the whole conspiracy that aliens are actually demons, because you have Crowley, who was an occultist using black magic to get in contact with these things.
Fair enough.
Ayahuasca, which was in Cairo, was a voice that Crowley heard during a seance with his wife at the time, where essentially he heard a voice that made him get into a trance and write an entire book, which is the Liber Al, the Book of the Law, which is the core, like the Bible for Thelema, for Thelemites. So you have one of the more infamous, and I'm not going to say greatest because I don't think he was great, one of the most infamous occultists that influenced, rock music and a lot of artists of their time, like I forgot which is is
Beatles?
Jimmy Page that bought the beat? Is it Jimmy Page that bought the house? Anyways, I'm not 100% on that history, but he did influence a lot of people. And we have this guy who was talking to interdimensional beings, essentially, that could have arguably been aliens. And I think that's what alien is, like that is extraterrestrial or interdimensional, could be the same thing. And so that's where the homunculus also comes into play, because the homunculus essentially is a vessel for what some scholars believe. Some scholars believe a few different things. Some scholars believe that homunculi are actually artificial demons, that you're creating a demonic entity. Some people believe that homunculi are vessels for demonic entities, and that would give credence and fortify the idea that the Nephilim, maybe perhaps that was the Nephilim's backfire plan. Hey, let's teach this knowledge to where they can make a vessel for us, that way we can come back and inhabit that vessel, right? Demonic possession is a real thing, is a real phenomenon. So what a better way than to give a backup plan to the people that you're teaching these dark arts to, and be like, hey, if I do get destroyed, because maybe they could tell the future, maybe they knew God was going to destroy them all. Like, let's teach these arts to these people. They're going to pass it down, and they're going to make all these vessels for us. And that's the whole, Ellen Marzulli thing, where they're making these Nephilim vessels, with the blood of the cows, because the cow blood can actually be used in transfusions for humans. I mean, they're interchangeable. So
it's also the plot of Chucky.
Is it really?
Pretty much. Chucky, the very first scene.
He puts himself into a different Chucky's body. Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah, like he's doing a magic ritual.
Criminal.
He's doing a magic ritual,
and he's dying.
When he's dying, because he's this Satan worshiper, essentially.
Bro, that movie's way off.
And I had a sleepover in second grade at my house, and I didn't realize that nobody else watched these kind of movies.
Nobody.
Except me. And
hold on, bro. Hold on.
You guys were like,
Homunculus confirmed.
There you go.
Chucky.
Confirmed the homo. homunculus for you.
That's hilarious.
Dan, I didn't even make that connection, bro. Thank you for that, because that's one of the
just popped in my head. I'm like, dude, that's the plot.
That's
of Chuck.
And that's scary as hell, because he's like screaming as he's like transferring himself. There's this like big lightning storm that kicks off.
It's
and
in the alley right when he's getting chased down.
He turns into Chucky, and then next thing you know, goes home with that little kid, Andy.
So again, these movies
Jesus
are grounded in some truth to a certain degree. And I mean, I don't know about you guys, but when I see a movie that says based on true events, I'm wondering the whole damn movie what the true event was. So it puts you in a sort of state of mind that maybe opens you up more, like to be more receptive.
Right.
Like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, knowing that it happened in real life. Well, what part of the movie was true thing? Like what part? And you're left the whole time like, oh, the one that really freaked me out, Hereditary, where it's like based on true events.
Wait, bro, Hereditary is?
I don't think I've seen it.
Oh, what's Hereditary?
Don't watch it because we have a theory that we have a theory that the movies that company produces, A24, are cursed. So we're gonna need
to talk about this. Sorry, Juan, you just stepped on it.
I don't want to spoil the movie for you.
You don't have to spoil it.
It does involve homunculus.
Is it? How old is this film?
Homunculus confirmed.
How old is the movie?
Homunculus confirmed. Homunculus confirmed. Good God, that's a homunculus.
Hereditary, 2018.
2018. Is there any is there actors in it that I would know, or actresses, or?
It might have been one of those.
So we have
under the radar.
Toni Collette, Alex Wolff, and then that's the only people those are the main two people.
Okay. So you believe that this film is produced by a company or a group that their films are cursed?
A24
right on. I want to hear this.
Some very occultic films, and let me pull up their film library so people know. Midsummer. I don't know if you guys have seen that one. Ex Machina was one of the ones.
I watched Ex Machina.
Uncut Gems with Adam Sandler was one of them.
I've watched part of that.
Right?
That's good movie.
So let's see. Priscilla, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. I haven't watched that one, but I heard that one was pretty occultic too. Hereditary, Lady Bird, The Whale with The Whale with this guy.
Is that what's his head? Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, haven't seen that.
The Witch, which I heard was really trippy too. I haven't watched that, but anyways, the point being that for this particular movie, Hereditary, they took various grimoires, so magic books on magic, and they pieced it all together and they made their own grimoire, which in my opinion would still work, because that's the thing about magic. It's meant to be adapted. It's meant to be used now.
Right.
They took a whole bunch of different, we can get into John Dee and Enochian here after this, because Parsons was using that for the homunculus, the Babylon working ritual to make the femunculus, the woman manifester. And so they're taking different pieces of different grimoires and they made a grimoire for the movie, specifically for the movie. Now, I was going to have this guy on who did this really, really, really great breakdown about Hereditary on this YouTube channel. I forgot the name. He told me he was going to come on, but he never hit me back up. But essentially, he has like this whole theories of. I love when people really go crazy with like fan fiction and like develop the story further than what we're given. I really love that. And so in this movie, the people who are behind it have to have a deeper knowledge of the occult to be able to construct what they constructed. And part of the occult, again, and this is just us, and by us I mean like my Telegram group and stuff, where we've come up with the idea that certain movies are cursed, and there's certain people, like my wife will not absolutely for no reason for any reason watch horror movies, and the reason for that being because she believes that things can happen, and that's true, because during a couple of years ago, there was a few reports of people watching that movie with that clown and they were being possessed in the movie theater. Because again, you don't know what a diet doesn't just consist of what you're eating. It also consists of what you're consuming. So if you're consuming bad things on a daily basis, it's gonna rot your brain, and maybe not physically, but you know what I'm saying, like spiritually or whatever it is, it's gonna wear down at that filter. Yeah, and that's the whole.
Remember what Lindsay said? Lindsay Brisbane. We had Lindsay Brisbane on from the Chilling podcast.
Yep.
And she lived in a demonically haunted house here in Akron, Ohio. If anybody hasn't heard of the Chilling podcast, you should go check it out. Very well done. Very well put together. But she lived in this house for, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years.
3 girls.
3 girls, her roommates in college. And, you know, when they were getting a tour of the house, they saw this really strange symbol in the basement wall.
They were like, they were very satanic.
Very desperate to get into this house. And so
they just didn't want to split up as roommates. They couldn't find a house that could accommodate 3. It was like 2 or nothing. And
they got into this house. And early on, around Halloween, they decided they were going to watch The Exorcist. And so they're all in the living room, and all this weird stuff starts happening in the house.
It just like raised all the energy and like gave whatever was going on like an amplified ability. So they're like, okay, we should turn this off.
And she said, if you live in a haunted house or demonically haunted house, do not watch horror movies.
I mean, it makes sense. It's just like throwing,
amplifies it.
Throwing salt and pepper into a dish. You know, you live in a haunted house, you start putting on some Phantasm or Poltergeist, and the next thing you know, they're like, hey, you got any popcorn too? I'll join you on the sofa. And you're like, no, like I'm good. Go back to
there's something in the occult that is called occulted scaffolding.
Okay.
And I think I'm the only one that's ever talked about that. And it's occulted scaffolding, and it's in relation to this other thing, Pythagorean palaces, which is a whole different theory. But essentially occulted scaffolding, you can apply it to really any occult principle where it's the intention that goes in behind that work that was produced. So take it as this. So when they're writing the script, all the stuff that was left out of the script, right? You have the director's cut of a lot of movies where they cut off certain amount. I think it was Eyes Wide Shut where there was like 20 minutes that they never put out or whatever it was. And I mean, that movie's already bizarre as is, but the concept of when people are an occulted scaffolding tip for people to get a grasp on it. When you're doing a sketch and you know, some people use like reinforcing sketches, or I don't know what it would be called to, they draw a circle to draw a head. Well, and then after they're done with it, they erase it. That's sort of occulted scaffolding where you don't know what went in behind the creation of said thing. So on our money, it says, "In God we trust." Everyone automatically assumes like, hey, that's Jesus Christ, right? The God that we all know and love. How do you know? How do you know?
Right.
These are guys that were in secret societies,
pretty vague,
that were part of secret occultic groups, and you automatically, but yet it has an all-seeing eye, has a pyramid, all this weird garbage on our money, sigils, right? That's what it is, sigils, that everyone's life revolves around, right? Nobody can do anything without it. So it's like, that's pretty occult. And it's like, well, you automatically assume in God we trust that it's the God that you know.
Right.
Right. And what about people from other religions? In God we trust it. Do they automatically think it's like, if they're Hindu or whatever, like, is it their gods? I don't know. Again, no disrespect, but you get what I'm saying. Like,
money is Babylonian money magic.
100%.
It goes back to Babylon through enslavement, through these paper systems. That was all about Jesus going into the money changers
temples
in the temple and kicking them out, because that was like that's like your first Rothschilds and Rockefellers.
Mm-hmm.
So people that were in banking were always into the occult.
Bankers.
Always into the 100%.
Occult. Yeah. And that's a hard pill to swallow for some people. So people are like, oh, you're reaching. It's like, no, if you trace back the origins of a lot of things. So that's why I said that there might be some secret hidden thing within these movies. And I'm using A24 because, again, you got to watch it to really understand what I'm talking about, because it's like a regular movie at first that you don't really know what's happening. And then at some point in the movie, it really, because it's a horror movie during the entire time that you're watching it. You go, okay, but where's the horror? You know what I mean? Again, based on true events, it's very lull, but they're doing programming throughout the entire movie. That's what this other guy breaks down. It's like, oh, do you remember this part where she was doing this and that? It's like, oh, it's all connected to this at the end. It's like, whoa. And so if you're not conscious of it, you're never going to catch it. But at one point in the movie, it gets cranked up to like 110. You go, oh, okay. And then boom, the finale at the end where you're like, that was really, really disturbing. And you're left with this like weird taste in your mouth, like Midsummer. Midsummer was created by the same people. And from what I've been told, they follow each other chronologically. I forgot. The guy told me one becomes before the other. It's a continuation anyways, but Midsummer, again, very low at the beginning. And then it just, at one point, you lose yourself in the story. You go, how did we go from this to what just happened? Right. So it gets very disturbing. And I've watched movies that had really like changed me a little bit. And maybe Hereditary, not one of them, but still pretty up there. And I'm not talking about like movies that are like banned in the US or whatever, because there's some of those. But again, this morbid curiosity of when you tell me don't watch that, you're gonna watch it. Don't watch The Human Centipede. Well, why not? Well,
yeah, I'm staying away from that one. Yeah, I'm gonna leave that one alone.
I'll take your word for it.
I want to watch this Hereditary. I want to see what he's talking about on this one. I'll watch that.
Yeah, burn a little
you guys
sage.
are watch it, but it's like you're talking about growing up. Well,
I just need it for information wise. Yeah,
we grew up in a time where we were getting like the early parts of the internet.
Yeah,
we were watching people get unalived on camera. Watching all the Taliban videos and all.
Yeah,
as a kid, going through middle school. You know what I'm saying? Like we were exposed to these things, and that there was some very disturbing ones that people, that you would come across. Even till this day, you'll get one or two on Facebook. I don't really go on Facebook anymore, but there's a lot of like gore at the early stages of the internet that we were exposed to while I was in middle school and high school. And like that's got to do something to you in the long run. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a reason why people got PTSD. Yeah, PTSD is a real thing.
Killsometime.com.
Especially when you're that young.
Yeah,
seeing somebody get beheaded is,
I remember that being a video I caught one time somehow, and I was just like, no,
we were in our
that's
20s.
Not for me. Like, I remember I didn't sleep well for like weeks.
Yeah, we were in our early 20s during that time.
The production value. They had some great production value at one point where I was like,
definitely do.
Where I was like, man, this guy just got his head blown up, but it looks really good. Like the shot cameras. Was, the quality like really shot up to where it got to a point where I thought it was fake. Like some of the stuff looks it looks so real because it's fake.
That some of those were fake. I thought it did come out that
I'm sure there were some at the
some of those were,
I believe it.
Probably like some kind of CIA group or something like that.
What was the statement I keep ringing around in my head is believe nothing of what you see and only half of what you hear.
Yeah, but seeing is believing. Well, not anymore. And
that is the thing. Unless I am right there next to you to witness it, it's really tough anymore with videos and deep fakes and this and that and just to the level of somebody put a video up the other day on X and there was like, what's wrong with this video? And it looked like kids from like the 1920s, like this video had just been colorized. But then when you're watching the video, you just start to notice the hands. And that's where you got to look at, the digits are all jacked up all the time. Or like when they're moving or something, like they morph or like kind of looks like Vincent D'Onofrio in The Cell when he's like speeding up and slowing down as that weird like psycho killer inside Jennifer Lopez's mind. Like that blur effect, where like you can tell something's off, but you're not sure what it is. But it'll get better and better and better.
Yeah, and that's the thing, the right, what I call the destruction of the uncanny valley, because as humans, right, and this relates all to homunculus, and we can tie it all in at the end, because it's I'll go on record to say that a lot of people in power in the government, in Hollywood and otherwise, world leaders are homunculi. Now, I'll state as to why. But the destruction of the uncanny valley as a person, when something is off. You get all these stories of Skinwalker and all these weird stories where people see something and they go, there's something off about that. There's something that isn't right. And I think that's the soul. I think that's the essence, right? And now I'm not talking about when somebody has like mental health issues, because you can also tell when that, and again, I'm not saying that in a bad way, but you can also tell when somebody's not there, because they're delayed in some sort of way, right? I'm talking about something completely different. I'm talking about just like a weird way of being, and not just I'm a weirdo, but you get what I'm saying.
An NPC or something like that.
that kind of dehumanizes a large amount of the population. I wouldn't say, yeah, I'm not going to say NPC. I don't think that's the correct. I don't think that would exist. I don't think that an actual NPC that is there for texture exists. That's just some people believe that, yeah, that there are people who are here just for texture. Have you ever seen your neighbor bring in groceries? I've never seen my neighbor bring in groceries. Does that mean that they're fake and they're an NPC? No, but you know what I'm saying? Like that sort of thing. Like there's a lot of things that sometimes don't add up, but
right.
And that's just a funny one, but
I meant more of like just like a term to like cover the fact that like if there are people out there that are like you're saying maybe more of the homunculi like effect, it's not necessarily that they're an NPC, but like almost like what you're trying to say, I think is
I don't mean it by that.
Okay.
I mean it by that a homunculus. So we have the evolution of magic and magical systems. So John Dee created a system of magic that got passed on, Golden Dawn, all these secret societies. Crowley picked it up. He turned it into his own thing. You know, groups in between there, the Rosicrucians and all those. I don't think the Rosicrucians were involved in Enochian, but you pick up this knowledge, you modify it and you tweak it to your own setting so you can use it. It's okay because again, you're tapping into a higher power. You have Crowley, and then he inspired Parsons, which Parsons took it and kind of tweaked it and made it into his own thing. So there's an evolution of the tech, right? I think it's technology. I think the occult is the technology that you're able to use and tap into. And so Crowley really broke down, he writes about this, the idea of the homunculus, not an alchemical homunculus. He did say that an alchemical homunculus could be possible, right? He did write about that. But he broke it down to where, in my opinion, I think this was where Epstein and all these guys come in, a homunculus could be as simple as the surrogate mother that you had, you know, carry your child, which we know a lot of elites and a lot of celebrities use surrogates. I mean, that's a thing in Hollywood, and we know the Kardashians and various people who have used surrogates. I'm going to make sure that she has the baby on such and such day at such and such time, XYZ. Boom. They astrologically align the birth of that person because maybe they believe that by being in the Leo constellation, you know, having a rising Leo and a setting, whatever. I don't know a lot of astrology, but it plays a role in alchemy and all the things. It's like they have more favorable attributes as a person. That to me right there, that's a homunculus. Now apply that to the U.S. presidents. We know that the U.S. presidents are all related by blood. I mean, except for one of them, that they trace back their lineage all the way back.
That's strange.
Mm-hmm.
That's strange, right? Like we know a lot of royalty and elites, they nepotism, and they keep everything in the family. So what's all that about? The Habsburg chin.
They're all Germans.
A big chin.
They're all Germans.
They were interbreeding with one, so their chin was like
the Russian czars were all cousins with the.
Sounds like Game of Thrones type stuff. The Targaryens.
Well, the house
of story, right? I mean,
the Windsors. They were Germans. Mm-hmm. They were all first cousins with Queen Elizabeth's father was first cousins with Nicholas the First, the last Tsar of Russia. Yeah. And then also, you know, the back then it was the Prussian Empire.
Right.
Which, you know, German Empire, whatever you want to call it. But they were just all, you know, Franz Ferdinand was related to all of them. And
too wild.
I got into that YouTube charts. The guy that makes all the big charts on YouTube, and then he makes these huge posters, but he makes these big high resolution PDF files, and then we'll just digitally scan all through these charts, and you look at how all these people are related, and then you go into other kingdoms of like Finland and Norway, and how, you know, the Russians were really just the Rus people, and how all these different groups and how the countries were just created by these big families that were just migrating to other places to start new kingdoms.
All a coincidence, bro.
Sure, you know, Charles the First.
This is all coincidence, bro.
You know, dude.
I'm sure it's just a coincidence.
I'm a person that loves
just happens.
I like to connect the dots. I get kind of hung up with.
But the funny thing is, when you do that, people go, "Oh, that can't all connect," and you're like, "No, but I mean, I can look through all this and tell you it does." And that's when it gets really weird.
And that's why I said at the very beginning, I know absolutely nothing more than what I do since the beginning of when I started researching all this. Yeah. I'm just presenting to you the research. You make of that what you will. I have my own ideas. Yeah, obviously, because taking in so many different points of views, but I don't know. I'm not saying that this is the truth, but how you're saying, when you start to look at the bigger picture, you go, something's off here. Something is weird about what's going on.
Right.
And you start to see a pattern emerge, and that's why I don't like the term conspiracy theories. I think it's pattern recognitionist. We recognize patterns, we connect the dots, and we do the, because some conspiracies are stupid. I mean, I think that some conspiracies are just
it's meant to take your eye off the ball.
Well, and to delegitimize actual
real things. Yeah.
Yeah.
But look at Jack Parsons, like what Juan's telling us, about the JPL and NASA. People really didn't get hip to that Jack Parsons and all these connections until 40, 50 years later.
Well, you're talking about back then, you would have had to have known Jack Parsons, or a story would have had to have come out and made it to the newspaper, yada, yada. Like, the information travels so much faster now, or at least it used to. I think it's stifled a little bit more now. They've gotten better at muddying it. So it's hard to figure out what's real and what's not. Because if we could get all the raw data, I think it would be too much easier to figure out what's actually going on. So there's always like today, for example, what was it? The SEC put out something about Bitcoin from the SEC's account. And then minutes later, they had to retract it. And it made Bitcoin do some crazy maneuver. Like the SEC, what did they tweet something about? They might have to hold themselves accountable and bring themselves to court for what they did for market manipulation. Like that's where we're at.
I saw the wick.
Yep,
I saw the wick. Yeah, it was crazy.
It's just interesting.
The hacked
and it shows even in shows, right? I don't know if you guys saw the show You.
No, I did not.
I think I have.
So it's a really good show. I'm not gonna spoil it, but at the end of that show, that series, they really show what I believe is happening. Like, I don't know if you guys ever saw House of Cards with Kevin Spacey, what happened with him.
Yeah.
But that show, and how when they I think they asked a representative or something one time, like, how accurate is that show? And he's like, well, it's 99.8% accurate. It's like, oh, why not 100%? It's like, well, because in a legislature wouldn't pass a healthcare reform that quickly. In the show, how quickly they had passed it. It's like, that's the most unrealistic part of
not
it.
The murder.
Of not the other stuff, the extortion, the murder, the this, the that. It's like,
they're like that. Oh, that's everyday. Yeah. Everyday cart.
And that, to me, because a lot of people will be like, hey, don't talk about. Obviously, there's certain topics that you can't talk about. And that's a given, right? There's certain things that you can't talk about, which we know what those are. But to me, there isn't any sacred knowledge that you're not supposed to have that you wouldn't wake up for, if you know what I'm getting at, right? I think that sort of knowledge where you don't wake up from knowing what you know is if you walked in a room to some people doing something that they weren't supposed to be doing, prominent people, well, now you're a liability. So therefore, you need to be eliminated. I think that's the dangerous stuff. Like, as far as all these alchemical tomes, if there is some truth to any of it all, because it could all be fake and gay, as I like to say. I think that's a possibility, that maybe these people were trolling us the whole time, and maybe they knew the secrets and they just never wrote it down. Right? I mean, that's also a possibility, which that you can apply that principle to any part of history, any part of ancient history. If you look to the victor, the spoils, whatever group wins is the group that graffitis over the previous civilizations, God's names, and puts their own and tears down their statues and tears down their buildings and builds churches on their old sacred temples and all that stuff. Like, we know that happens. So how much of history? I mean, just history itself. How many times do you not make a typo sometimes typing things up? You don't think things are going to be translated incorrectly or typed? And I'm not trying to say this to discredit any religion or say it's fake or anything. I'm just saying man is imperfect. We know this. Man makes mistakes. Just take that into consideration, because people will fight wars over religion alone. So just think about that next time you want to judge something, whatever it is, at the end of the day, I think that how I have always said, I think that we all have the right puzzle pieces. They're just mixed up. They're all jumbled up, and not to sound cliche, but not until we can all come together, we'll be able to solve this puzzle. Because I don't think that's going to happen either. I think that the powers that be, need everybody in a constant state of fear, in a constant state of disorganization. Again, religiously, politically. I mean, we see that a lot, and I think that some people worship their political parties. Again, I think if you're still caught up in the left-right paradigm, you're in the meat grinder. You still have you have to really break out of that mentality, because I think that's just herd mentality. And mammals are some of the only animals that stampede. Look at buffalo. I mean, they would stampede off of cliffs. They use that same analogy for humans. Like everyone starts to panic, starts to jump off the cliff, and you're not. It's just. Yeah, it's crazy.
Dividing the people from the inside. That's how you take down empires. Yeah. That's the army handbook of the Green Berets and the people that go in other countries. We do that to other countries all the time. We embed ourselves into their culture, and we start dividing, whether it's through newspaper articles, whether it's through the radio. Like, that is the playbook. We do that. Why wouldn't somebody else be doing that to us right now? Right. And is embedded into our culture right now. It is so much easier to take us down if we're all worried about Trump and Biden and all these fools that are just dinosaurs that need to be, they're homunculi. And they need to be, the whole swamp needs to be drained, not just the left swamp and the right swamp. It's all one big giant. So you go ahead and you stack spaghetti sauce at a store. China. You
can't tell me that's a real person, bro. I mean, both of those guys, you can't tell me they're real people. There's no way. There's no way, bro. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's no, it's in front of people like William Shakespeare, one of the greatest. How do I say this? One of the greatest, not magicians. I don't think he was a magician. Maybe he was a magician. I think that he was into some. There's a conspiracy that he traveled around with John Dee and Edward Kelley, but he's at the forefront of the English language. Like a lot of words that we have come from Shakespeare, and this is a guy who literally tells you, the world's a stage. Every man and woman has their entrances and exits. It's what it is. These people are at the front of it, and again, you can't tell me these are real people. They're homunculi. I believe that they were bred for a certain purpose, part of a certain family who will exert their power, and the charades going on, a fight. We saw this in wrestling, when the two fighters would be mortal enemies and then find out they found them doing, some sort of drugs backstage in the car. They got arrested.
That was Weinstein always talks about this kayfabe. He always talks about wrestling and kayfabe and how you can apply that to politics as well. And it always makes 100%. Me think of the movie Road Trip when the one guy needs to learn all of the Greek history. And he's like, "Do you know wrestling?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, then I can tell you Greek mythology and history." He's like, "I'll just explain it to you through kayfabe." Yeah.
Well, that was John Duggan and the Iron Sheik.
Oh, Jim Hacksaw Duggan.
Jim the Hacksaw Duggan.
John then.
John the Hacksaw Duggan and the Iron Sheik were partying after an event, and all these people saw them at the bar getting hammered together.
They're like, "You can't do that. You guys hate each other."
And
they're like, "No, dude, that's all a show."
Some journalist was there and wrote it up in a newspaper, and that was like one of the first instances where people started to realize, like, "Wait a minute, wrestling's not real."
At least wrestling. I never really got deep into it. I know people who have gone like, wait.
When I was a kid,
I used to watch it every Sunday after church.
An entire lore, bro. It's like an entire lore.
Jake the Snake.
At least wrestling is one of the ones that'll tell you it's fake up front, but still people will believe it. Yeah. Like those kids watching it believe all the stuff that's being, again, extrapolate that, bring that out. Like
and now when you can make that a little bit more finely tuned, to where it's not as easily recognizable, how do you really know it? You know what I mean? Like, so that's the finesse of the kayfabe that's going on, is it's gotten so much better where people are like, "You really think they're friends?" I'm like, "Yeah, They go to each other's weddings and this, like, yes, they're friends. Like, they're going to show you one way to get you to vote one way. But behind the scenes, man, do you think they don't all sit at the same tables and go to the same meals and get the same pay and benefits and insider trading and whatever else? Like,
Yeah.
there's a whole host of reasons to get into that club.
Pelosi's the greatest stock trader in the entire history of stock trading.
Right?
Better than
she beat all of the hedge funds last year. Her return was like 63%.
She's got some knockers on her though, bro. I'm gonna tell you that much.
Oh yeah.
You know.
She's Andrew
Schultz calls them heavies.
Something like that.
She's got some serious chutzpah.
Now, Juan, I do want to backtrack because we brought John Dee up and
I don't know who John Dee is. I just know the name now.
Bub,
I know. I'm like a babe in the woods here.
Yeah, let's talk about because
I keep thinking John D. Rockefeller, but I know that's not right.
Hey.
There's a lot of great books and things that I've read a little bit, but I've seen a couple really good documentaries about John Dee and Enochian magic and that system, which is Enoch. The root there is Enoch, which is the grandfather of Noah.
With it.
The book of Enoch, which is one of the books from the Bible that were not allowed to be included.
Doesn't make any sense, but I'll follow you.
So that's kind of the lineage of, but Juan.
Yeah.
John Dee and Edward.
For the record, John D. Rockefeller did create the creature at Jekyll Island that we all know and love as the Federal Reserve. So I'm sure that's just a coincidence. But John Dee, and I don't know if you can see it on camera. No, you can't see it, but I have a massive tome of the magical journals of John Dee and Edward Kelley. Now, John Dee was a sort of polymath. He was the court astrologer of Queen Elizabeth. Now, I don't know of a lot of the history behind John Dee. He was a mathematician. He was a cartographer. He was at the forefront of a lot of cartography, which is also occult in my research. Maps back then were used as talismans, and they were used for all sorts of weird things. Also, another aspect of the homunculus is to help you find treasures, which Edward Kelley, the associate of John Dee, found the Voynich manuscript with the use of a homunculus, a spiritual creature, as they like to call them. So again, it wasn't a homunculus, but it was called a spiritual creature, if you will. And so John Dee, this is what the Faustian Pact is modeled after. He had this crazy rich history, and I've read probably 5 or 6 biographies on John Dee. And he had a political career. He had a mathematical career. He was the first one to translate Euclid's forgot which Euclid paper in English. So he was all over the place. He was a polymath. And it got to the point where he's like, he had the largest library in Europe for his time at one point. So he had all these crazy books, including a copy of 2 copies of the Liber Vacae, which is a grimoire on how to create homunculi. So there's the connection there. You can connect John Dee. He might have read it. He might have not. Maybe he collected it, right? There was a lot of manuscripts that were collected back then. But nonetheless, he did have a copy of that. So I'm sure he was aware. He was an alchemist too. He was trying to create the Philosopher's Stone. And he got to a point in his life where he felt that he had acquired all the knowledge in the world. And he needed to find knowledge and extract knowledge from outside space. And he believed that he needed to talk to angels and entities is what he was talking to, and outside sources. And he needed a way to do it. So at one point in time, there's a story where he is in his house and he hears a knocking on his window, and he opens the window, and I forgot which angel it is. I think it's Raphael or Michael, one of these typical angels, like the different archangels, one of those. And he gives them a little quartz egg, and this is still on display at one of the museums. He gives them this little egg, and he has this supernatural thing. This is a guy who was being haunted by poltergeists. He had a lot of poltergeist activity in his house. There was things falling off the walls and knockings and just weird stuff going on with this guy. He documents all this. You can read all this.
Okay.
And so he's trying to find a scryer to work with him in order to access this other side, right? And scrying, essentially what it is it's a form of divination, and you're supposed to, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to stare. Some people use different things, but mostly it's known as using a black mirror. And you're supposed to stare into the black mirror, and you're going to go into this sort of hypnagogic state, an altered state of consciousness, and you will start to have visions. Okay. That's just, again, the crystal ball. Think of the crystal ball as one of the forms of divination.
That's where it comes from in modern pop culture. The crystal ball, that was John Dee and Edward Kelley were using this crystal ball. And Kelley was the one that was receiving the messages from the angels, not John Dee. John Dee was just taking the system and essentially cataloging everything and making it into something. Edward Kelley had no idea what he was saying or doing. Okay. He was just literally the guy that was channeling the information through these crystal balls, through these angels, is how they were appearing. This
gets more interesting
into this crystal ball. It's wild shit. Stuff.
We're gonna turn it up to 10. It gets way better. So and by the way, he had various scryers. He had one, Barnabas was one of the first ones that he had. He ended up stealing from him, so he ended up letting go of him. And again, I could be getting some of the details wrong, but he had at one point his son was also scrying for him. John Dee's son scryed for him for a little bit. And after Edward Kelley and John Dee broke up, I'm going towards the end here, there were magical journals that were lost in another set of seances that he had with this other guy. And we're never going to know. I think his name was Bartholomew, the last one. We're never going to know what they encountered. But essentially, he finds Edward Kelley, who, again, there's mixed feelings as to if the grifter was Edward Kelley or if the abusive one in the relationship was John Dee. They're still split. They were saying that John Dee was abusing of Edward Kelley and vice versa.
That's what I heard.
Because Edward Kelley had a reputation for being a forger, and he was the cropped-eared wizard, and he was forging documents, and they would chop his ears because of as a form of punishment. So he was the black sheep. And when he introduced himself to John Dee, he told him his name was Edward Talbot. Well, he didn't tell him his real name. And at one point in time, the angels are like, "This guy is lying to you." Right? Like there's something fishy going on with this guy. This guy's not what it seems. And eventually he ends up telling him his name was Edward Kelley, and maybe he lied to him saying that so he wouldn't recognize him or something. Who knows? Like, we don't know what was happening in between them behind the scenes. Mind you, these guys were scrying and having seances for 10, 12 hours a day. They were in this room. Their kids are running around the room. They're trying to do the scrying. Like, it's crazy because this was a form of, right, it was angel magic. It wasn't, although he was labeled, making deals with the devil and all that stuff, to them, alchemy, and again, this is the psychology of the time, because you have the Salem witch trials happen after and all that stuff. But the idea that as long as it was natural magic, magia naturalis, which is if God put it in nature and I mix A plus B and I get C, it's okay, because otherwise God wouldn't have put it here if he didn't want me to use, what I'm saying?
Makes sense.
A technicality. Like, as long as I don't use outside forces, right? Outside astral influences, it's good. And I'm also talking to angels. So I'm talking to angels, and they're going to protect me, and they're going to make sure that no demonic entities enter and mess up what we're trying to do here. We're just trying to get information. So that was their philosophy. And they're doing all this stuff. They're trying to also transmute lead into gold. They're doing all these things. And eventually the angels give to them a system. And this is they didn't call it Enochian at the time, but essentially it's a language with a syntax, with a whole, so you can look this up. There's a whole Enochian dictionary, and linguists have looked at this, like actual doctors, and have looked at this and they go, it's not a made up language. It's a real language that we don't know where it came from.
Yeah.
Okay. And now there's conspiracies behind that. Like, well, Edward Kelley made up the whole thing. Mm-hmm. If Edward Kelley made up the whole thing, he would have to be one of the smartest individuals of all time, because the way that they were presented this alphabet, essentially, and all these tablets was backwards, right? So in some of the visions, there's a whole bunch of different ones. In some of the visions, the angel had a long stick, and he would point at the letters one by one backwards. This was a painstaking process. This happened over, I don't know exactly how many years, but over years. And the reason that they wanted to, so there's 31 aethers, and aethers is different dimensions essentially.
Okay.
And every aether has its guardian. So an entity that guards that aether. And the angels were showing them essentially what some people have come to hypothesize about, is that they were showing them a different dimension, other realities through the use of this technology, through the use of Enochian, the language in which Adam named everything in the garden, in which the last person to know it before he went with God was Enoch. Okay, that was the whole story behind that, of why the last person to know it was Enoch. So that's why it's called Enochian. They didn't call it Enochian when they were doing it. To them, they were just doing seances. They were just talking to angels, right? So they were being showed this alphabet backwards and all these tablets. And you can look these up in the British Library Museum online. You can look up the whole tablets and everything. Like, this is real things. It's just grids of numbers. And essentially what you do is, because people practice Enochian, and it's one of the most powerful forms of magic from what I've been told, and one of the most dangerous forms of magic. And what they do is they follow the letters, and they're able to make the names of different entities, and you're able to call forth the guardians of these aethers and again access them or consult them. But they hate humans, and they get really pissed off when you call on them. So the angels, when they were showing them the names and everything, they were doing it backwards. And they're like, we're doing it backwards right now, because if we were to do it forward and you accidentally were to spell something, you could quite possibly bring forth the destruction of your entire reality. Like that's how severe this was, that these angels were showing them, again, how to deconstruct reality. And John Dee, again, this is a really vast topic, but John Dee went on to create the Monas Hieroglyphica, which is a sort of alchemical symbol that's used to deconstruct reality itself. There's a joke that John Dee's actually the demiurge, and, with the whole camera obscura and all that stuff, that he's actually the one, controlling reality and all that stuff. Again, there's a whole thing, because this guy was talking to ultra terrestrials. Mm-hmm. And if you read the descriptions of what he was talking to, in my opinion, and what I've been meaning to do is, I've been meaning to do an episode on just this, and I want to plug in the descriptions that he gives us into AI to get a picture of what he was seeing.
Oh wow!
Because at one point in time,
we'll tune into that.
Yeah.
At one point in time, God shows himself, and I have a picture of this. God shows himself to them. This is towards the end. God shows himself to them, and he didn't show himself into like what we call Saturnian God, right? The old man on a throne, white hair. We've all seen that. We all think of God like, oh, he's Sky Daddy,
Santa Claus,
maybe right?
A little thinner,
European, whatever you want to call it, right? Like the whole thing. And he shows himself as a whale.
Okay.
Covered in eyes. So think of a whale covered in eyes. That was God to them. Now, there's various ideas as to what John Dee and Edward Kelley were doing. Some people say that they were taking psychedelics. Some people say otherwise. Some people, I don't believe that they were taking psychedelics, because and I think that the abuse was on both parts. I think that Edward Kelley was taking advantage of John Dee's naiveness, if that's even a word. He's very naive, right? He's very a matter-of-fact guy. Think of a nerd, right? He's really smart. He's probably a nerdy guy, like, hey, I can talk to angels for you, bro.
Mm-hmm.
Help me cover these medical bills that my sister has, and this and that. And I married a woman that I hate. Like, this was Edward Kelley. Like, he married a woman they hated and all this stuff. And so they travel throughout Europe. It gets to the point where the angels are like, all right, we can promise you. And mind you, they made magical furniture. They made Enochian tablets. They made rings. They made chest plates. Again, this story goes deep. All under the instruction of these angels. And it was to use this magical system. Now, it got to the point to where the angels were like, all right, essentially, to wrap it all up in a nutshell, the angels were trying to bring forth the apocalypse. And they wanted essentially a new world order of a new religion, okay, this new hermetic religion, essentially what they wanted to do. It got to the point where the angels were like, all right, we'll proceed on to the next part. And mind you, Edward Kelley is the one getting all these downloads. All right. And he's telling John Dee. And it got to the point where he's like, all right, well, the angels want us to go visit Rudolph II and tell him that he's been possessed by demons and that he must give himself up and free of himself of these demons. Mind you, you're going to go in front of one of the most powerful people in the Holy Roman Emperor at the time. Mind you, the only reason that they didn't die is because he was the alchemical emperor. He loved all this shit. Like, he loved all of alchemy and all hermeticism and all that stuff. He loved all that. He also had a court of midgets. He thought that little people were magical. He had a lion roaming around. There's records of him paying people off because his lion like mauled on people and stuff like that. Like tigers.
Jesus.
Bro, wild guy. Wild guy. So they go up to this guy and they're like, hey, listen, you're possessed by demons. And who told you? Well, the angels told us. All right. He dismisses them, right? He's very stoic. This guy had like no feelings whatsoever. This guy didn't really care. And then, long story short, they get kicked out of Prague because Edward Kelley got into a fight with one of the guards, ended up killing him, and they ended up leaving, right? I want Hollywood to make a movie on John Dee and Edward Kelley. It would be the craziest movie because it's like the story is wild.
Oh yeah, with CGI now, it would be incredible.
It would be crazy.
I just don't think they could have made that movie 10 years ago. Well, maybe 10 years ago, but 20 years ago when John Dee kind of started hitting the zeitgeist and this story started hitting the internet. But now, oh my God, it'd be a series on.
I need to read up on it.
HBO Max or Netflix or whatever.
Yeah. So they visit Rudolph. And then at one point in time, this is the infamous wife swap. They're scrying, and the angels are like, all right, well, if you guys are gonna, do the magnum opus and use the system and transcend to the next level, essentially, you have to share everything, including your wives.
That's where it always gets weird, doesn't it?
So it got to that point to where
it always gets weird.
Edward Kelley wrote at one point in one of his journal entries, like it was done, like they did. And the whole joke behind all that was they literally swapped wives because the angels were telling them to swap wives. So they ended up doing the do with each other's wives after all this time. And it's like, were you talking to angels? What were you talking to? If you were even talking to anything at the end of the day that made you do that? And like, what
Kelley
a bizarre
just wanted
request.
to hook up with John Dee's wife. I mean,
yeah,
very
bro. Can
well
you
could be
imagine?
John.
I would have loved to be a fly on the wall for that seance. Like,
right?
Yeah, they're. Yeah, I don't know who's gonna take this.
Yeah.
It's got to be done. If we want to if you want the next set of tablets, you're gonna have to do it. All right.
Yeah.
But isn't that how all cults end?
Yes.
And begin with one of the guys wants the deuce, the other guy's wife.
And once you're on tape, then you got to do the bidding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Golly.
So
great story.
And before that, it got really weird because and again, this is depending on the story. There was my favorite is when a group of angels show up and a group of entities, and there was also demonic ones in there too. There was one point in time where the angel was like, "Hey, I fended off this other entity," and it got really bizarre because in some of the visions, the angels would be fighting and hitting each other with sticks, and then at one point, one like chopped another one up into pieces. It was like really psychedelic. Wow. It was like really weird. And mind you, you can read all this in books. You just look up John Dee's magical journals, and so at one point in time, this group shows up, and they're like, "Hey, who called us?" And Edward Kelley's like, "Hey, I didn't call you." He's like, "Well, somebody called us." And they go back and forth like, "Who called?" And it said that the angel takes a spade, right? So a shovel, and starts to beat Edward Kelley, just beat him profusely. And John Dee's writing like, "Hey, Edward Kelley throws himself on the floor and starts screaming in pain. And his arm, they broke his like ethereal arm, and his arm was all red." There was one point in time where Edward Kelley asked the angels for money. There's another time where the angels start speaking in Latin, and Edward Kelley's like, "I'm not good in Latin, so stop speaking in Latin." So very weird stuff. If it's such a bizarre case, and that's why I love it, because what did it really happen? Maybe it did happen, but because of these guys, we have the Enochian system. And it's interesting because once you use the Enochian system, I've heard accounts of people encountering Enochian entities on the other side, and they're very geometric in nature. So angels, angles. So that makes me think of like Lovecraftian, the angle that was obtuse, but not really, like this non-Euclidean architecture, like these non-Euclidean angles where it's like, what are you looking at? It's like AI art when you look at it, but it kind of morphs and it kind of resembles what you're thinking about, and your brain will kind of like form a picture. But when you really start to look into it, the fingers are off, or the eyes are off, or it looks exactly like what I think it does, so very weird again. And it's such a psychedelic story. I'm not giving it, I'm not doing it justice. I'm doing a very condensed version, but yeah, John Dee, Edward Kelley, essentially from them, we get the Faustian bargain, which is the deal with the devil. And we have the Enochian system, which was passed down, Golden Dawn, all these different secret societies. They say John Dee was at the forefront and the founder of Rosicrucianism. They use his symbol, the Monas Hieroglyphica, as the symbol. If he was or not, I mean, it was after his time. Who knows if he had anything to do with that? But again, very smart guy, worked for a lot of royalty, but at the end of the day, he died penniless
and
broke,
miserable. Yep,
and miserable.
So
they broke into his. They broke into his library, stole all his books, and at one point he got stuck with King James, that hated him and was terrified of him because King James hated magic, apparently. So a very, very superstitious guy, but that's a whole other story. Because
religious guy.
King James, what he did in 1611. But I've got my own thoughts regarding that, and that's a whole other podcast. But
yeah,
dude,
man, this was awesome, dude.
I feel like I just got an education.
Yeah, you did.
I was like, what? We are talking about stuff here I've never even delved into. This is great.
I've wanted to do an episode like this for so long because, like I said, a lot of this stuff, I'm like, as Juan's talking, I'm like, oh my gosh, bing, bing, bing. There's so much hitting me because it's been a while since I looked into a lot of this. So it's really fun for me to get a refresher. And he knows much the deeper levels of a lot of this stuff than I do. So it's really, really been awesome, dude. It's been awesome. Great episode.
Like he said earlier on, everybody loves a good story, right? Like that's what I love about doing this podcast in general is just like, I just feel like I sat down to like a TED talk of like esoteric and occult for me, just for me.
Don't take my word for any of this.
No, I don't mean it that way. I'm just saying just to broach the subjects, even if it's in a sci-fi way of even giving you the thoughts of something to open your mind up to these realities or these conversations. That's all I meant. I didn't mean to like go out and, start toting the path, but no, it's just more of like, there are people that'll go, how do you even know about something like this? How'd you ever hear about something like this? It's like, well, somebody else either researched
very late
it
nights.
Yeah, right.
Very
and paying attention and stringing together the different pieces to really, because your narrative is going to be different than somebody else's. It's not going to be, verbatim as Mike or I's or whoever's, even if you're in the same thread. Sometimes you can have disagreement, like, no, we both agree with homunculi, but your homunculi is one way and mine's the other way. It's like you can get there, right? It's like, so that's more of what I meant.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's why I like going on a lot of different shows, because I like to, even if I cover the same topics, we still cover them from a different perspective. Or you might say something like, hey, Chucky is a homunculus. Like, wait,
he was.
Boom.
Right.
I can't even comprehend.
Yeah.
Let's hit the homunculus confirm button.
Homunculus confirmed.
Bam.
Like I didn't make that connection right there. Like
I love that playback. That soundbite.
So yeah, this is fun. And hopefully, like I said, double check my research. Again, there's a lot of information that I poured out there. I encourage everybody, do your own research.
Right.
And anything, right? And read. Read. There's a lot of information out there. And I feel like people don't read anymore, and you learn a lot from reading. From my experience.
Right. Yep. If you do it correctly, take the time and really internalize it afterwards and digest it. Sometimes I've been a victim of reading too quickly and forgetting whatever, just like, so sometimes I have to like really pace myself to be like, I need to keep this piece of information.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It happens to me. I'll read, a few pages, put it down, digest what I just read for a day or two, and then pick back up, because some of the stuff gets heavy and gets dark too.
Yeah. Yeah,
sure.
it does. That was me. I had to tap out after a while. I
Take
like
a
to
break.
go back into it and dabble like tonight. This is fun.
Yeah,
but,
great.
You know, you can overwhelm yourself. Man, this has been great. Let's put this baby to bed.
Fantastic.
This is the Strange Road.
Homunculus to bed.
I'm gonna get bunk beds for homunculus. The monk
Oh
bunk.
man. Yeah, this is the Strange Road one-on-one swapcast.
Yeah.
It's been epic. This has been great. I know we'll do another one of these.
I would love to.
But it's been awesome. The opportunity to get in front of your audience, our audience,
Right.
people that watch our show are definitely going to love this.
I'm stoked. Yeah.
I'm Mikey. This is Bub.
Bub.
We're The Strange Road. You guys can find us at The Strange Road on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, wherever you listen to your podcasts. We got the YouTube show rocking and rolling. We're putting out a lot of different reels, clips, TikToks, different stuff like that. We've got a show called Strange Happenings, our interview show, The Strange Road. Come check us out.
Right on.
TJOJP.com at the One Podcast on all social media platforms, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, all that good stuff. Patreon.com/the One Podcast. And yeah, give me you guys' information. I'll send you
Word.
the homunculus owners manual so you can keep your homunculi.
I want to see
love it.
that. That's
Check.
awesome.
There you go.
Love it.
Turn it
Much love,
American.
brother.
Juan, appreciate you, man. Thank you
Juan's the
so
man.
much.
Absolutely.
What a show.
Awesome. Hell yeah. Well, we are signing out.
Done.
Peace, love, and chicken grease.